Good to go.
Ron. Hey, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm excited to introduce Brian Murdock, an Army veteran who's still proudly serving in the Army Reserve as an officer in charge, OIC. Brian's been deployed and earned prestigious awards, Bronze Star a couple times, MSM, and was named Soldier of the Year in the second ID. Transitioning to the civilian world, he built a successful 15 plus year career in medical sales leadership, including top performing roles at Boston Scientific and now Coloplast, where he leads teams and champions veterans through their Valor Employee Resource Group. He completed his MBA for veterans at USC Marshall School of Business, designed specifically for vets like you. He's mentored transitioning service members, including sharing his journey here with us today. Welcome, Brian. Did I get it all right?
You got it right. Sounds good.
Oh. Home run. I guess I get you started. Can you kind of walk us through your transition out of the Army and, kind of how the lumps and successes of entering the civilian workforce hit you?
Yeah, so I was on active duty for a little over 12 years. I started as an enlisted soldier, went to officer candidate school, and then sort of reached that fork in the road that a lot of officers reach when they're post company command and they're thinking about the next steps. And so I transitioned out at the end of 2014. I went to a hiring conference with one of the JMO recruiting services that I'm sure everybody is familiar with, and I landed in the medical device industry. And for me personally, I don't think I could have lucked in, honestly, to a better industry. Because I think, like a lot of us, as we're thinking about our transition, you haven't heard of 90% of companies that you may be interviewing with. You don't know exactly how your skills as an armor officer will translate into the corporate business world. I think, a lot of us have paths as we're getting off active duty. Some of us feel more comfortable staying in government work because it's familiar. I kind of wanted to change a pace. And so I wanted to go into the business world. And so I landed in the medical device industry. I was a territory manager in Los Angeles for about 3.5 years. While I was there in LA, I went to business school at USC. Business school kind of sucks you in a little bit and it makes you think you're going to be the next big CEO of, name the company, name the industry. And so I took a little bit of a risk. I got out of the medical device industry. I got into the transportation industry. I moved back to my hometown. And 9 months later, I found myself looking for a job and wanting to get back into the medical device industry. I took a position down in Phoenix, Arizona. I was a geographic bachelor for about a year, and then I got promoted into management at Boston Scientific. I managed with Boston for a couple years, went through some personal life transitions and job transitions, which is something that I can kind of get. This transition that you guys are getting ready to make to get into um, to get out of the service will just help you build skills because life continues to happen and you have your ups and downs and you need to be able to be nimble and respond. And so I left Boston Scientific. I worked for a couple small startup companies. And then I landed here at Coloplast in June of 2023. And it's been an amazing opportunity to say the least. This is the most enjoyable job I've ever had. This is the best company I've ever worked for. And so, things for me right now on a professional level are about a 10. Um, I'm really happy about that, but it was a little bit of a bumpy road to get here.
Yeah, without getting too deep, I mean, what were some of the experiences that you had that you think some of the folks here might need a little bit of a heads up on for those speed bumps, potholes, and occasional guardrails that hit?
Well, I won't go too far into one aspect, but I think a lot of people on this call can sort of empathize with the tremendous strain military life puts on your family. And a lot of us think we're going to transition out, we're going to drop roots, and there's no scar tissue from all those years that you spent um, overseas or away from the family, or all the moves that your kids had to make, and everything of that nature. And so, um, I had some personal challenges.
Yeah.
And then as far as job challenges go, we're all pretty secure employment wise in the military. I think when you work in the corporate business world, um, you can get let go at any time. Um, they go through, we have rifts in the military, but they're not as common as they are in the corporate business world. So sometimes you just get downsized out of your position. And then you're kind of left holding the bag in terms of trying to find the next opportunity. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. And so, um, I've certainly taken a lot of swings since I've been out in the corporate business world. And some of them have been home runs. And some of them, I've flied out, and so what I'll say for the military time is that we've heard this a million times. It builds character, but you're going to need that character, when you get out. Um, and it's cliche and it's talked about all the time. You lose that sense of belonging, I think, at times. Honestly, that's why I'm back in the Army Reserve. I got out of the military completely for about 3.5 years, and then I did the business program at USC that was all veterans. And I came to a realization that my best friends and my support system are my, brothers and sisters that I served with. And I had a buddy call me and he goes, "Hey, I know you've been thinking about it for a little while. You want to come back in at least part-time?" And that was it. I was back in. I joined the reserves in 2018, and I'm still here today.
That's good. Finish out that 20, man. That's gonna come back when you're 60, and you'll like that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so I mean, how much has kind of continuing in the Army helped you professionally versus harmed you professionally? Because I mean, I was guard for a long time. I saw the good and the bad with that. I mean, what are your thoughts there for folks who might be considering guard or reserve after active?
Um, it's definitely something worth weighing. I was going to go right into the reserves right off active duty. And then I just happened to have a happenstance conversation with a guy at CIF of all places when I was turning in my gear. And he goes, "Hey, sir, what's next for you?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm moving out to LA, and I'm getting into the medical sales industry, and I'm gonna join this reserve unit at 400 Liggett." And he's like, "Bad idea." And he just put a seed in my head, essentially, like because ironically he was part of that unit, and he was kind of telling me about the pace of life with that, being a OCT at 400 Liggett as a reservist. And I just thought I need to get out and have my number one priority be um, making it in the business world. And so I made a decision at that point to not join the reserves because it does present challenges. When I got out, I was a territory manager, and so I was responsible for all the business that happened inside my territory. Well, if I'm not there, someone else has to cover down. And it's not. And when you're a field-based employee, it's not like working in an office. I had a geography, an area of operation, if you will. In Southern California, I was responsible for driving revenue in that area, and I didn't want to risk having to go away to a CTC for a month at a time and leave my territory. Someone else would have had to cover down. So I've had to think very critically about that every step of the way, and I still have to think about it. So, sort of the crossroads that I'm at now um, is I am retirement eligible. I do have the number of years to retire. Um, in about a month, I'll be ILE complete, eligible for promotion to lieutenant colonel. And I need to ask myself, is it a higher priority for me to command a battalion in the United States Army Reserve, or do I salute, get my handshake and my PCS or my retirement award, and then really focus on my corporate business career? And at this point, I'm leaning toward, you kind of have to take your life in phases, I think, and not to get too philosophical. But the first 20 years or the first 20 years of your life, you're kind of growing up. The next 20 years, you're kind of building a career. And then the next 20 years, I'm 44 years old. I have to build towards retirement, and I have that Army retirement. And so it's, do I sign up for another 3+ years to command a battalion, or do I try to climb the ladder here at my company? And so that's kind of the next fork in the road that I'm at right now is do I want to be a lieutenant colonel more than I want to be a national sales director? And those
Yeah,
are
that's a
questions I
tough
have to
one.
answer.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I mean, retiring as lieutenant colonel is a good pay bump. And also, a nice little pat on the back. Hey, I made it because that's a big deal. But also, the career pays a lot better, and it's putting the money in the bank. So I do not envy you that decision.
Ernest, give me just 1 second. I got the sun just shooting right in my face right now. Let me close the
Yeah,
blinds. Sorry about that.
yeah, no worries.
All right, I'm back. It was
Enough
killing me.
vitamin D for the morning. Hey, so talk to me about the your MBA for veterans only. What's that all about? What was so special about that program? Why did you choose that?
It's an absolutely special program for me, for a variety of reasons. The concept of it is I think it's a really smart one, and I would love to see more masters of business for veteran programs across the country, because you had to have a certain amount of qualified leadership experience. Like I had to submit my OERs. The NCOs in the programs had to submit their NCOERs to show that they have in fact served in leadership positions. Because the whole concept is a traditional MBA is taking a lot of business professionals and teaching them how to be corporate business leaders. Um, we get a ton of leadership training in the military. And so the idea was take this group of folks that already has proven leadership ability and provide them with the business acumen they need to be able to lead businesses. Whether it's probably 50% entrepreneurial track. So how do we business model? How do we understand a value proposition in a key customer segment? And all the resources that needs to go into get to starting a business. And then how do we take our knowledge of structures and uh, chains of command and everything that you need to do in order to, because once a business gets so big, you have to start filling in your HR department, your marketing department, your operations department, your sales team, all those kinds of different activities. And so, military people tend to understand those structures and how those structures fit together in order for organizations to create alignment and run cohesively. But we don't have all of the business skills that we need in order to kind of make that happen. And so um, it's about a 12-month program. What I liked about it was it was all day Friday, all day Saturday, every other week. So I worked with my manager at the time. I got his permission to do it, and then I got the time to be able to. I mean, it was a grind. As a territory manager in LA, I was already working about 60 plus hours a week, and then having an MBA program on top of that. But it's kind of like a lot of assignments that we've had in the military. Sometimes, you just got to put your head down, fight through and make it happen. And that's what I did. And it was an awesome experience. Um, I don't necessarily know what the reputation of USC is across the country. But it is absolutely 100% a top-notch university. And, of all the college programs that I've been part of, I've been most proud to be part of USC. The dean of students walks in the first day and he says, "Welcome to the Trojan family," and you're now part of that Trojan network. And so they made us all feel at home. And then they knew it was an accelerated program, and they just provided us more resources that we could possibly even use. More connections. I didn't end up staying down in Southern California, but I got to connect with everybody from, the commercial real estate business to technology companies to obviously LA is known for the film industry. It was just a really, really unique opportunity. And if anybody on this call is in the position or thinking about it, I'd highly encourage them to attend one of the programs where they just talk about the MBV program. If you're in Southern California, we had people travel in because it was every 2 weeks. There were people from out of state that would fly in and go to class on Friday and Saturday and fly home on Sunday. And so it
Ooh,
is doable, but it's a really, really awesome program.
that's a heck of a grind for them too, because they got to take the time out of their week, pay for flights, and spend that time. I don't envy them at all. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
good.
and and it just kind of depends on because I get asked about it like is an MBA worth it? And I answer like any good MBA, it depends.
We're a lawyer.
It depends on what your career goals are. I mean, for me, sometimes I just try to simplify things, right? And so when I was at my first national sales meeting and knowing that I wanted to be a leader within the organization at some point, and I'm looking on stage, and every leader that was on stage had an MBA, for me, I said it'll make me smarter business wise. Um, and it seemed to be a bar to entry for certain, positions, VP and above. And I didn't want any sort of educational deficiency to slow down my career progression. I do a good job myself slowing down my career progression, and so I didn't want it to come down to somebody else has an MBA and you don't have the MBA. I always wanted to put myself in a position where um, my skill set, my capabilities will allow me to advance. I didn't want education to kind of hold me back. So, it was kind of a simple decision for me and ended up being, one of the better decisions I ever made.
Yeah, you're not wrong either, because I've definitely seen that. And, even like in engineering companies where, hey, we like that MBA better than the engineering degree because they get up to that level of business where they're making those types of decisions. That's been your experience as well.
Yeah,
So,
and I've worked with a lot of people that have that engineering uh bachelor's degree and have an MBA, and they just tend to be very, very well-rounded individuals where they have a high level of technical competency, and then the MBA kind of forces them to, a lot of engineers, let's be honest, are kind of introverted.
oh, a
I
little bit.
think, I think going through an MBA program kind of forces them to come out of their shell, and when they come out of their shell and they start talking, you realize they have a lot of really amazing things to say, and they've spent their life thinking really critically about things, and so their words tend to be a little bit more powerful. I'm an extrovert through and through, so I tend to think less and talk more at times, and at least I recognize that about myself, but also I could take some lessons from the introverts in my life.
Yeah. Guilty. Guilty. Yeah, same. Hey, so with the background of the education and the MBA, you've got that stuff covered. So what military skills did you carry over that have worked very well in the business world, and which ones did you say trash?
I wouldn't say too many I've trashed. I mean, probably the probably the stuff you have to trash is how we talk to each other.
Uh, well, that
And I don't mean when you're like briefing the CG, but when you're talking with your buddies, um, certain words fly out of your mouth that aren't welcomed in polite society. And just culturally in the combat arms community, in the Army at least, and I would probably think the Marine Corps and other services. So there's definitely a vernacular out in the civilian business world. Um, there's certain types of skills that um, or I wouldn't say skill. There's cultural things you should probably kind of scale back a little bit, but it's mostly been really positive. I credit my time in the military and my continued service with all of my success, you know, uh, good or bad, that I gained in the military. You just the amount of people that you get, the amount of different types of people that you get exposed to. I mean, I bet, everybody can think back to their basic training experience. All the way back in basic training, they start that leadership, like your leadership pathway starts in reception. I mean, even when you're in a reception, they assign a platoon guy. They assign squad leaders. And so the military is constantly reinforcing leadership skills. And when it's time to follow, you follow. When it's time to be in charge, you're in charge. I would say that the one thing that corporate businesses and all businesses struggle with is alignment. And alignment is something that we live and die by, in the military, I mean, just the operations order process, of everything kind of trickling down to you. And so we're used to in the military having that alignment with the chain of command. And that's really a good skill set to have um, when you're in business, and you can start to recognize when things start to get a little chaotic and everybody is doing their own thing. You can be that leader within a company to bring people together, because you can recognize very quickly that we're out of alignment, and things aren't working the way that they're supposed to work. But I took a lot of skills. Like my first year, I just tried to break everything down, like IPB style. Like I said earlier, a territory is an area of operation.
Mhm.
Within my area of operation, or territory, I had some key terrain, I had some key influencers. Um, my two deployments were largely working by, with, and through, first in Iraq and then in Afghanistan, local national forces. And so where my skills as an armor officer were maneuvering tanks, or maneuvering, a cavalry troop or a platoon, um, I I learned that the relationships I had to build when I was in a deployed setting, when the stakes were the highest, it are skill sets that helped me tremendously first get the job, because I'm interviewing with a company with zero corporate sales experience, and they're asking me questions on how I have confidence that I can drive revenue, that I can build relationships, and I was able to fall back on the fact that for anybody that was deployed to Iraq, let's say after 2009, or anybody that was deployed to Afghanistan after, 2010 or 11, when we had to work with the local security forces, can talk about all day long how they built relationships in high stakes environments in order to achieve a certain end state. And so I was first able to sell that to these companies, that, hey, I know how to build relationships. I know how to read people. I know how to get things done. And then you can just demonstrate that you have a track record of being able to accomplish things. And I always tell everybody, I humbly say, the company that hired me took a big chance on me, but I think it paid off for them, in terms of results. And that's objectively true. Just in the sense of, I was able to come into a territory, I was able to learn the business very quickly, and I was able to grow revenue. When I took over my first territory, it was about $3.1 million worth of business, and when I left 3 years later, it was 4.5 plus of business. So I was able to take those skills that I learned in the military, apply them to a sales job, and then grow revenue, which was my, for lack of a better phrase, my mission.
Yeah. So speaking of sales, you're killing it. That's obvious. So what advice do you have for folks here who are looking to get into sales? What things should they start focusing on now, learning now, tricks, all that kind of stuff?
Um, I would say, just one, for people who are thinking about sales, it's like, why would I want to go into sales? And to be honest with you, um, when I started my transition, there was no way I was going into sales, because as chaotic as the Army life was, because when I thought of sales, I probably think about sales the way that maybe some of you guys are thinking about sales right now. You're like, Brian's got his nice shirt on and his jacket, and he's trying to, get it. People think about used car salesmen, and they don't understand business enough to know like the purpose of a business is to make money. It's to it's to grow revenue. And your salespeople are the ones um, that are out there doing it. And I had a lot of informational interviews with people that I knew or people that I connected with on LinkedIn to learn more about sales. And what I found is it really just connected with, my personality. And I read a book, and I said this on the last time I called, and I tell it to everybody that I mentor. I read a book by this author named Dan Pink, and it's called To Sell is Human. And what that book helped me realize was that all of us are salespeople. Whether you're a a section sergeant that's trying to influence your platoon leader to execute something a certain way, you're influencing them. And that's really the essence of sales is influence. If you're a staff officer and you're trying to influence your commander on a certain course of action. Um, teachers, if teachers have to sell their curriculum all day long. And so reading that book really helped me realize I've already been in the sales business. I just didn't have a number attached to it. And so, for anybody on the call who's thinking about sales, what I love about sales is, I don't know if anybody on the call has ever received an evaluation that they didn't like, where they thought that they did the best job in their unit at in their particular role, and when they got their evaluation, it was just kind of vanilla. And when I first got out of the army, I didn't want to have to deal with that. I wanted my success to be on my shoulders, and I could wake up every single day and see how successful I'm doing or not doing because we have a sales number. And so if you're conducting the activities that you should and you're doing the job that you should be doing, then you're achieving the results that you're going for, and it's not what somebody else thinks about you, but you're kind of controlling your own destiny, and there's also the aspect of it of I don't ever have to go ask for a raise because if I want a raise, I just work harder, I sell more, and then I can have sort of the income and the lifestyle that I want. So that, I think there's a million good reasons to go into sales if it fits your personality. Let me caveat it with that because um, if you can't handle rejection, I tell new reps that I train all the time, like we swim in an ocean of no, trying to find a yes. And so you deal with a lot of resistance. You deal with a lot of people that don't want you in their office. And you just have to have that resiliency to continue to conduct the activities that will lead to good results. And so um, there's a lot of books written out there about the joys of sales, but that's a little bit of my take on it.
Brian, good morning. It's Clay. I've had to take over an emergency. Ernest lost his internet, so give me just 2 seconds here while I sit there and get on. But it's good to see you again, sir. How have you been?
I've been fantastic. No, I
Nick,
had
I'm going
a
to let
great
you
year
kind of
last
take
year, and
point. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Nick,
was
go
gonna
ahead,
jump
brother.
in. So you talked about the sales at what's the downside of the sales piece that you've experienced over the course of being the sales guy?
um, I I try to think positive, but it's a little bit of kind of what I alluded to. I've worked some jobs in the sales industry that are just flat out tough. I sold pharmaceuticals for a little while, and I felt as I was trying to get out there and engage with customers, um, there was a lot of layers of people that kept me away from the person that I needed to talk to. Um, there was one company that I worked for where even when I met with a physician and they wanted to use the technology, it was such a complex, complicated technology that it was hard to implement in whatever healthcare system they were working with. Um, Probably one of the biggest things that I had to deal with when I left active duty, the last significant job that I had on active duty is I was a troop commander. And I don't mean this in like an arrogant way, but those of us in the military, it's a lot of respect. Obviously respect is codified. Like we have to respect superiors and all that. But I went from an environment where I felt I was very well respected to I was one of thousands of medical sales professionals in LA, and you're not respected. At times you're disrespected. People don't want you in their hospital. They don't want you in their clinic. There's all of these layers of people to try to keep you out. And for me, just if I take a step back, it's, I have to figure out how to overcome um, obstacles. But it is challenging. You kind of feel, um, it's hard to explain it. I mean, the word that's coming is probably not appropriate to say on this call, but
It's like you get
um,
ego checked every once in a while. You get ego checked all the time.
you get ego checked constantly. And that's kind of a tough pill to swallow. It's kind of changed for me now that I'm a sales manager because I'm really managing my team to go out there to drive business versus actually being the one out there to drive business. And then the customers that I deal with tend to be the higher volume people that have already adopted the technology, or they'll bring me in there if they need to close a doctor, kind of a deal as opposed to the everyday grind of the job. That's probably the negative aspect, but the positives, and I'm not trying to sell all of you guys on the medical device industry, but the positives outweigh the negatives so much that you kind of deal with those things that are not as pleasant. Um, when first you're trying to get established in the industry, and then once you're in for a while and you have a great relationship with your customers, and they become your friends, and you just kind of enjoy life most days. But when you first get started, it's a little bit of a transition to say the least.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. Christopher, go ahead, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us, Brian. So, before you
Absolutely.
became a sales manager, I imagine you had to go through a lot of training and a lot of rejection. How long did it take you to transfer to a sales manager and trainer?
So let me see here. So probably about 5 years total. I kind of alluded to it earlier. I don't want to say I self-sabotaged. I made a decision to get out of the industry, and that probably slowed my progression to get into management.
Hmm.
But I was in LA for about 3.5 years, and then I took the job here in Reno at the transportation company. I was there for about 9 months. I went to Phoenix for a year, and at the end of that first year in Phoenix is when I promoted into management.
Cool.
So probably 4 years total if you take away that year that I decided instead of working with physicians that I wanted to work with truckers.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, Christopher, for someone like you, Brian is an absolutely fantastic wealth of information. I do highly recommend you connect with him. Brian, one thing I did want to sit there and bring up was, recently I did a training with these guys on how to work with your manager if your manager in an environment is not really exceeding expectations and he's kind of all over the place. When you have one of your salespeople come to you to kind of gain a little bit more insight knowledge to solve a problem and things like that, what's your thought process on that? Like, what are you doing in order to solve for their root cause problem and be able to continue the momentum for them.
Are we talking if that employee is having a problem like he's underperforming, or that employee has a problem that he needs help getting solved?
Needed help getting solved. I apologize.
In those cases, I read a good, I think it was a Harvard Business Review study, but it was talking about different types of leadership styles. And I can't recall all of them off the top of my head, but one of them was a connector. And they said connectors tend to be sort of the most effective leaders. And what a connector does is they they first have an acknowledgement that they may not be the best one to solve their problem. So in my industry, for the product that we sell, I carry the bag, and so I understand how to train new reps. But when I have reps that have unique problems, what I try to do is obviously first listen. I don't get on my for those that are familiar with Office Space, the movie, I don't get on my jump to conclusions, Matt. I really try to listen and understand what the problem is. And then I try to figure out, am I the best person to help solve this problem? Or am I good to help solve a portion of this problem? And so what I typically do with my reps that have issues are I'll give them feedback on the area where I know that I can help them out. If it's one of those issues where it's like, are you creating an environment where you're just solving your people's problems all the time and they're not solving their own problems? And so I try to push them on areas where I think this is something they could figure out on their own. And then lastly, it's like, who can I connect them with that can better answer the question than I can? And so I get a lot of calls from my reps about inventory issues or kind of sales operations issues. And I refer them to the point of contact that they need to go to, because number one, when they come to me to solve a problem and I don't solve the entire problem for them, but give them additional steps that they need to take in order to solve it for themselves. One, it tends to lead to a better solution, because for that 20% issue that I wasn't the best person to solve, they went and talked to the person that could help solve that problem for them. And so that, they start to get they start to get answers. I mean, it happened yesterday. I won't go into all the details of the exact type of situation because it involves some things that
You're
you
good,
guys
Brian.
may
Don't worry
not
about it.
know. But I had an employee so right now they're starting a program nationally in 5 states where they're using AI to review medical charts to decide whether or not to approve a procedure. Well, this initiative is affecting one of my reps in the state of Washington, and she called me very concerned about the impact on her business, and I referred her to the point of contacts in our company that are actually dealing with this issue. I didn't pretend like I was an expert on it. Um, I told her, I said, "Hey, talk to this individual. They're taking the lead on solving this problem, and then report back to me on what's discussed with them." And so I didn't solve their problem. I simply connected with them with somebody who's better able to support them, and then they're going to back brief me on what they learned, so that I'm a little bit smarter and she's a little bit smarter, and we can work collectively on solving this problem together.
I love that. I love that. I want to get your take because you mentioned the 400-pound gorilla in the room. AI. How often are your teams running into AI integrations with the practices that you have partnership with? Great example is new show on HBO, The Pit. One of the actors is using AI for dictation on charting, things like that. So are you seeing more and more of that start coming into your realm?
100%. The of all of the business tools that have been implemented in the decade plus that I've been in the corporate business world, I have seen nothing take hold faster than what AI is doing. Um, and it's one of those, I don't even know what we'll call it, platform tools, whatever we want to refer to it as. Um,
Infrastructure.
yeah, that's really changing things. And, I was part of a wargaming exercise for my business about 2 months ago, and everybody showed up already having inserted our read ahead into a chat GPT system in order to spit out a business model for a competitive business that we were doing the wargaming exercise on. And so people are using it. And as soon as I'm done with ILE, the next professional development, um, education, self education that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get as smart as possible with AI tools in order to help me be a better sales leader. And I'll give you a real world example. Um, the number two customer in my region, the competitor recently went to them and offered them an over the top ridiculous deal. And so what I was able to do was take all of the variables that affect my upcoming contract negotiation with them and feed it into an AI tool. And it's what it brought back to me is not necessarily 100%, but it's a really good foundation on how I can approach my upcoming contract negotiation with them. And those AI tool, I just think if we don't get on board with AI, then we're going to kind of be left in the dust. I think it'll be able to provide a lot of information really fast to help support business leaders make better decisions and move things along a lot more quickly. And that's really my next goal. Again, after my Army education is complete, on figuring out how I can utilize AI better in order to be a more effective business leader.
Before I go to Mary to ask her questions, or have her ask her question, connect with Nick, who's here. He's one of the AI wizards that I have personally chatted with. Yep, and he just raised his hand. But Mary, you go
Yeah.
ahead first. Oh, hold
I
on.
just know
Go
I
ahead,
sent
Nick.
him, I sent him a LinkedIn request already. I sent your LinkedIn request is all.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thanks,
he's
man.
the AI. If I have an AI question, I go to him. But Mary, go ahead, please.
Hi, sir. So my question for you is, as someone who's trying to break into the industry, being completely new, what are some like skills or mindsets or maybe like some mistakes beginners should like understand early on?
Well, I think so, some of the mistakes are just some things that, or kind of watch outs are some things that I looked out for. Fortunately or unfortunately, there's just some things you're not going to actually understand until you get into it. Um, like one of the things I mentioned earlier on this call is like how I sold myself to companies as being able to build relationships with people very quickly. Uh, that was true, but building relationships with customers out in the civilian world is much different. Like when we're in the military, we get to new units and we have to build relationships. If we go to a deployed environment, we have to build relationships with the security forces that we're working with. But the difference is we're kind of forced into those relationships. And in the corporate business world, there's seemingly no incentive for those customers to try to build a relationship with you. So it takes a lot more time. So I don't know if that was necessarily a mistake when I first got out, but I didn't realize how long it was going to take for me to build the relationships with the customers that I needed to build and then start to grow my business. And so my first year out, I didn't hit my quota, and that was kind of a tough pill for me to swallow. And then after that first year, I really had a great relationship with my customers, and then was able to start to grow my business. One thing that I would encourage everybody who's thinking about getting into sales is learn a sales process. Um, there's a million sales processes out there, from spin to challenger. I teach my new reps the sales process. So sales being an acronym, so start with the strategic intent, ask questions, which seems like simple, but you have to ask questions to identify and uncover unmet needs, listening to what the customer sends back to you, and then being able to explain insights to that customer on how when you ask those questions and you listen to them answer, you can explain an insight that will meet one of their unmet needs. And then the final S is secure commitment. That's just a simple one. I like it because, I'm an Army combat arms guy, so I like to keep it simple. Um, but there's sales processes out there. So if you're thinking about going into the sales world and you don't have any sales experience, um, if you show up to an interview and you demonstrate I've been able to achieve objectives, I've been able to build relationships, and oh, by the way, I've been taking the time to train myself on a sales process, I think that might give you a leg up in the interview process. And one thing I'll throw this in here, and hopefully you guys are okay with this shameless plug. Um, but I have been working, so I'm the president of our veteran ERG, and one of my biggest goals when I myself and a couple other folks started this veterans focused ERG at my company was to become a skill bridge company. And so we have a sales internship that's posted right now, um, that's open nationally. It's only one spot, but an intern, but if somebody is interested or knows somebody that's interested that wants to take advantage of this internship, that is a huge leg up in getting into the industry and learning about it because you'll come out one of two ways. You'll say, this ain't for me, or you'll do what I did. You'll get into this industry and be like, wow, I think I can make a career here. I think this could be really great. And so if any of you guys are interested or know anybody that's interested in taking advantage of the sales internship that we have posted right now, um, I'll be managing that program. And so I think it would be a great opportunity to get into the medical device industry and work for an awesome company like Coloplast Medical.
I was about to say that because if you're offering that internship, Brian, that's just absolutely remarkable. And Coloplast is, I like to use the term 400-pound gorilla, as you know. Yeah, it really does give you a leg up, guys, because they really are one of the best out there. And working with Brian directly is going to give you the skill sets to be in an incredibly, incredibly lucrative sales career. Kevin, you're first, and then Nick, I'm going to have you sit there and finish us off, sir. Kevin, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, technical difficulties. Hey, Brian, thanks for being here this morning. I really appreciate it. So I have been on the fence about, pursuing a sales career. I don't have a sales experience. I'm 25 years in the Air Force, but so you mentioned To Sell is Human by Dan Pink. Is there any other books that you recommend that, we could kind of read to kind of help give us an insight into whether we think this is something for us or to help us, I guess, get some training in what it would take to enter the sales market?
That's a great question. Some of those sales processes books that I mentioned, spin selling, challenger selling, I mean, they're all processes, but they're books, that come out of it and they explain the sales process, but then it's a book, so it has a lot of information on specific circumstances, specific incidents on how somebody was struggling in a certain area and they implemented this sales process and it helped them out. um I just have some classics, and some of this isn't going to sound that profound, but like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Yeah, it was written almost 100 years ago, but that was an impactful book in my life. I actually read that book on my way to Afghanistan. And I think it helped me build relationships with my Afghan partners. And I took a lot of those lessons on building relationships with my Afghan partners and took it right into the sales industry. Um, You know, Good to Great by Jim Collins, I think is one of the top-notch books. Dan Pink has another book that I've read since I've got into management called Drive. And that's really understanding how do you really motivate your reps in order to reach peak performance? Like what really motivates people? Because a lot of people, again, misconceptions about the sales world is like, yes, my folks are very money motivated, but there are things that I would argue are a higher level of motivation. You know, I don't believe as a sales manager, you can simply throw money at a problem in order to solve it because it's like, how much money is enough money? You know, to keep throwing like how do you motivate your reps to do more? You know, and there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And, you know, Drive is a book that where they're talking about human motivation that was really impactful on me as a sales manager.
Awesome.
I'm
Thank
sure
you.
there's some other great ones out there too, but those, you know, those are the ones that kind of just come to mind.
Awesome.
Absorb it all. This is a great sales leader right here. Nick, finish this off, sir. Go ahead.
Hey, Brian, thanks again for coming on. Just a quick question. You had mentioned that there's the internship possibility with you guys. Would that be where we would log on to Seven Eagle and look at the information, or do we go to your site, or how does that work?
I recently posted the job. So if you go look at my LinkedIn page, the link to apply for that position is available. And so it's a SkillBridge specific sales internship. So I'm assuming,
Yeah, I guess that's okay. So that's what I was trying to clarify here. So
yeah,
we're in SkillBridge right now with Seven Eagle, and then they have OJT opportunities where we can OJT with companies. Is it a part of that alignment, or is it its own separate entity where
yeah,
you're
yeah,
SkillBridge with your? Go ahead.
yeah, it's part of the SkillBridge company. We established a position about a year ago. Um, to work at our warehouse in Houston, and we just didn't have a great response rate. I think it might just be because there weren't a lot of military installations that were co-located with or near Houston. And so what I talked my management team into is is this sales internship because I'm in the Northwest and I would love the intern to be in my region. But you know, we also can open it up nationally so that if we find the right candidate, you know, regardless of geography, they can learn. And the idea is it's going to be, I'm in the men's health business unit of the interventional urology division at Coloplast. And so it's going to be primarily a men's health sales internship. But the goal is, depending on how long whoever can work with my company, I'm wanting them to get exposed to other business units within interventional urology, outside of interventional urology, um, into our wound and care division, continence care, all that kind of stuff. Because the goal for me really is the person who occupies this internship that when they're ready to transition out of service, that there is a clinical specialist role, there's an associate territory manager role, um, potentially a territory manager role somewhere open in the country that they would be willing to go to. And having that experience and already working with Coloplast, it could be a seamless transition right into a job. That's my goal. Again, because I felt very lucky to be able to walk out of active duty and come into the medical device industry, this would be a pathway for that.
And it's a solid pathway. Brian, I apologize me coming in here when Smitty was having an issue, but it was great to see you again, sir. Always a pleasure to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Brian a huge round of applause for coming back and thanking him for his time and education on Coloplast and everything they offer. Sir, always a pleasure. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Great to see you again.
Yep, thanks all. I appreciate the opportunity.